Welcome back. You're watching the CNBC TV18 Budget Town Hall, and it's time now for us to welcome on the program the CBDT Chairman, Mr. PC Modi. Also with us, Dinesh Kanabar, Rashesh, Shah and Mukesh Bhutani. Gentlemen, many thanks for joining us here. Mr. Modi, there's lots of questions for you, sir. Dinesh Kanabar had one, so let me go straight back to him. Mr. Kanabar, you now have the CBDT chief, and you heard from the Finance Secretary that make your representation to the CBDT Chairman, so go ahead, sir.
Thank you. If I reiterate, sir, that delighted that we have kept tinkering with the tax to the bare minimum. As I was mentioning earlier, almost everybody had sort of accepted that a 2% COVID cess would be on the cards. No such thing has happened. Indeed, very, very welcome. More important, two important changes which have been brought about, which I really welcome, because those are the representations which I had made as a FICCI committee member, which was with regard to the TDS on return InvIT and the TDS on securities income received by FIIs. And the questions which I had for you is, with such a nice budget, such a nice background, right direction, there are a few things which have been done, which in my view could have been probably approached slightly differently. So, for example, sir, we have yet to see the changes that may be required to the Act, given the fact that there are many people in India on account of inability to move out because of COVID. And we need to sort of relook at how India will approach permanent establishment, place of effective management, business connection. So while we made some changes earlier on with regard to the taxation of the individuals, we haven't sort of addressed this larger issue, which OECD has recommended. Also, there was this change with regard to not allowing depreciation on goodwill, which is sort of overturning a Supreme Court judgment on the issue. The way the definition has been worded, there seems to be some sort of a gray area as to how much retrospective is it, because the definition is way back from 1998, whereas the application is prospective. I wanted to know if there were some thought processes in this regard. I have a couple of other questions, but let me stop with these two, and then once you respond, I can on other two.
Memorandum.
Thanks, Mr. Kanabar. Let me get Mr. Modi to respond to these two specific questions that you've raised. Mr. Modi, go ahead. Mr. Modi, can you hear us? I think we seem to have lost that line with him. This is the disadvantage of operating in a virtual environment. Sometimes the broadband fails us, and it looks like that's what's happened now. Mr. Modi, can you hear us, sir? Okay, we will have to reconnect with him, but we've also got with us Rashesh Shah with us. Rashesh, many thanks for joining us. Till we reconnect with Mr. Modi and, of course, get him to answer the specific questions that have been raised by Mr. Dinesh Kanabar. Before the budget, we were chatting and we talked about the possibility of the ARC-AMC structure coming in to address NPAs. Now that it has, what do you make of it?
I think it's a good thing, as we have always, maintained that I think the distressed asset in the banking sector, it requires really specialized handling, and ARC special purpose AIFs, which are vehicles which can manage it, is always a good thing. I think the key question is going to be, where will the source of funding come from? Because even an ARC government can give 10-20,000 crores as equity, but they will still need borrowing. So we need eventually to create market-based, mechanism. And we do think that AIFs could be a great way. There is a lot of international capital available, and even giving some tax incentive for stressed asset-focused AIFs could be a good idea, because then the investors can put in the money. Because one of the problems with stressed asset is the timing is uncertain. Unlike a normal credit investment, in a stressed asset investment, you don't know whether you will get the money back in 3 years, 5 years, 8 years, 10 years. And that is why we need to attract special kind of long-term flexible capital for that. But I think it's a great beginning. I think even DFI is a great beginning. But again, the key issue is going to be the sources of funding. And we do hope that this comes from the bond market. So I think the bond market should fund the financing for these vehicles.
Okay, for both the DFI as well. At least as far as the DFI is concerned, the government has allocated 20,000 crores. But the DFI secretary told me that the government will not put in any equity as far as the ARC is concerned. That is expected to come from the banks to start with. But Mr. Modi, I believe that I have you back. I hope I have you back. I hope you heard Mr. Kanabar's question, sir. Your response.
I could hear him only partly. I think he did make some point on not allowing depreciation on goodwill. Can you just repeat that query once again?
Be as brief as I can.
Mr. Kanabar, you want to quickly repeat that?
Yes, I will repeat it. I'll be very brief. So, the point I was trying to make was that goodwill arises as a result of either corporate restructuring or acquisition. And I do not see any rationale as to why should, first of all, goodwill on depreciation be denied, particularly if it is paid for an acquired goodwill, number one. And number two, the way the amendment has been worded, where the definition to the clauses have been changed right from 1998, leaves room for multiple interpretation as to whether this is prospective or retrospective. I wanted to know whether there is any thought process. The earlier question I had, sir, was that there was this whole issue that while we have, in the light of people staying in India on account of COVID and inability to leave the country, sort of made modifications to individual taxation rules. There is no corresponding change to place of effective management, business connection, permanent establishment rules, as has been recommended by OECD, because you might inadvertently end up creating business connection or permanent establishment on account of people being in India who can't go because of inability to catch a flight.
Mr. Modi, go ahead.
Ani, so far as the issue of permanent establishment or the period of stay creating some sort of a permanent establishment, you would recall that in the past, in the last financial year, we did come out with a beneficial circular. Of course, that circular is yet to come so far as this year is concerned, because I would expect the normalcy to return first, and when the international travel is again allowed, I think that is the time when we can take a good call as to what should be included and what should be excluded. But such a consideration can take place only once the normalcy returns. So far as question on depreciation on goodwill was concerned, I think it was more of an anti-abuse provision. The instances which had come to our notice in the past did indicate that it was not the intention ever that such a kind of provision should be kept in place. Moreover, wherever the goodwill has been acquired, and that cost of acquisition is well recognized, it is only in question of an artificial creation of the differential which is termed as goodwill. That is the question.
Appreciate.
Okay, well, that's the
Can I have a couple of follow-on points, Shirin?
Can I come back to you? Can I come back to you in just a second? I've got other guests waiting as well, so let me come back to you in a second. Mukesh Bhutani, go ahead with your questions and comments for the CBDT chief.
Well, Mr. Modi, congratulations on a successful budget. I think there are very good features and interesting features at the same time. My question was more on the discriminatory treatment for the services sector. So bringing down the tax rates to 15% for manufacturing is a good move, but services is still 22%. When I make this statement, I make it with a sense of responsibility, considering the fact that 3/4 of your FDI is coming in the services sector. 54% of the economy is in the services sector. And the services sector also has been subjected to intense regulatory pressure, whether that is coming by way of how the SEZs work. There is a fantastic report by Baba Kalyani, which is on the table, and the Ministry of Commerce has been pushing that report. I was personally feeling a bit let down because I felt that you would bring the services sector, particularly, since you have a sunset clause for the SEZ within the 15% range. My other question was dispute resolution is a fantastic move. Why couldn't it be extended beyond the small and medium taxpayers? Why have you restricted it to 50 lakhs? And number three, by having this committee, which is going to adjudicate or settle the dispute, why only two people from the revenue services? They have to now have a consensus to deliver a resolution to a taxpayer. Would it have been appropriate if you, and that's my advice as well, please include someone from the judicial services like the tribunal, so it becomes 3 members. And finally, if this decision is rendered against the tax department, why should the department appeal to the High Court against this decision? So these were some of the questions that were quickly crossing my mind.
Four questions coming in from Mukesh Bhutani, and that was a point that Mr. Kanabar had raised as well on that. Go ahead, Mr. Modi.
I'll come to each one of them one by one. So far as the issue of extending the benefit of 15%, am I audible? Hello? Hello?
Yes, go ahead, sir.
Am I audible?
You are audible,
sir. Of extending this, the question of extending this benefit of 15% to the services sector, I think this was not the correct moment to consider this issue, since we were not considering any change in the tax rates or any extension of the new rates to the new sectors at this given point of time. So far as the DRC is concerned, a question was raised as to why only limited to certain level, certain threshold, and why not to the higher end also. Broadly, I can say that when we considered the nature of disputes, the quantum of disputes in the category which we have now worked out, we found that our majority of the disputes are in the lower end, constituting almost about 50 to 60% of the disputes in that category. So we thought that this is one segment which is not having an alternative dispute resolution mechanism available to them. So let us first extend this benefit to them, and depending upon the experience which we gather, we will see whether it can be, whether it requires any changes or whether it can be extended further upwards or not. So far as the board constituted for advance ruling is concerned, I think the experience so far has been that we have had a number of applications pending, but the authority did not have the requisite number of people manning it. So at least now we have a situation where we expect that some decisions will soon start emerging out of the new body. And so far as appeal is concerned, I think there has been a case for and against. I think we took the call that it should be made appealable. That is how it goes.
Okay, that's the response coming into the four specific questions raised there by Mukesh Bhutani. We've got another Mukesh joining us on the program, Mukesh Aghi of USIS PF here with us. Mukesh, many thanks for joining us. We're in conversation with the CBDT chief, PC Modi, and we'll shortly be joined by the DPIIT secretary as well. But Mukesh, your thoughts as a foreign investor looking at India on the back of what the budget has announced, and any specific queries that you may have for the government?
I just want to congratulate the government. It's a very far-sighted budget, and it expands the pie by increasing the deficit and focus on healthcare infrastructure. My question would be is on the retroactive taxes. We have two in front of us where arbitration court has given the decision on Vodafone and Kane Energy. My question to Mr. Modi would be is, can we settle this and move on and bury the ghost of the past?
Mr. Modi, I asked you the same question yesterday. Given the fact that in both these matters, the arbitral award has gone against the government and in favor of the companies. In one matter, you're appealing. On the second one, you said you're under active consideration. You haven't taken a call on whether you will appeal. I would imagine you will appeal. But to the point that foreign investors are making, it's gone through the judicial process. Why not sit across the table and settle it and bury this issue once and for all?
I think, Shirin, that was
Go ahead, Mr. Modi. We can hear you.
Yeah. I continue to maintain the same stand as what I had conveyed to you yesterday. It is the normal process which we undertook in the Vodafone case. After a lot of deliberation, the view taken was that it was to be appealed against, and we did go in for appeal. And so far as the Kane matter is concerned, the matter is still under active consideration. And I think very soon we will be able to take a call on that as well. Broadly, that is this position which remains as of now. And it would be difficult to hazard any guess as to whether any contrary view would be taken or not.
Okay, so from what you're telling us again today, it looks unlikely that this is a matter that's going to be settled as you hope that it will, Mukesh. But let me bring Jayant Krishna of the UK India Business Council into the conversation as well. Jayant, I know that this would have been an issue that you would have wanted the CBDT chief to comment on, but you've heard what he has had to say. So any other queries that you have with respect to the budget announced?
Shireen, I would still say that if Government of India accepts the two verdicts, it would send a hugely positive signal to the investor community all across the world, which India needs at a time when the entire world is looking at India to relocate part of the manufacturing supply chains, away from China to India. So it would send the revenue loss would be far offset, by the heightened, investor sentiments. That's what I wanted to say. In general, I feel it has been a business as usual kind of a budget. No significant changes in taxes. There was nothing dramatic, so which is good because it reflects some kind of a stability in the policy regime. On FDI front, I think there are a few good proposals, especially the insurance one. Infrastructure, the kind of spend level that you have, about 5.54 lakh crore. PLI allocation itself about 1.97 lakh crore spread over 5 years. I think these are and the healthcare allocation increased by about 130%. So I think for these sectors, there would be some spurt in the inflow of FDI. It is good. But I think on the trade front, I did not see much in the budget. In the sense, not much to incentivize exports beyond what is already done, and not much to rationalize or reduce and rationalize customs duty. I think this is the fundamental issue is India's trade to GDP ratio has fallen by about 3.5% to about 40%, and at the peak it was about 56%. So India as a country somewhere I feel still doesn't believe that trade, can create jobs, So I think it's very, very important to rationalize customs duty, which is an opportunity. Of course, the finance minister did announce that she would look at it, and some 400 product categories are being talked about and are being discussed and reviewed. Yeah. And in October this year, I think, their outcome would be known. But I think it's very important, if Indian economy has to be integrated well with the global economy, we have to look at, because Atmanirbhar Bharat would work only in that way. How do you leverage technologies from elsewhere for manufacturing in India and for export from India, not just for the